Exe Valentine by Suzy Bussell. A Lockwood and Darrow Mysteries short story. Charlotte Lockwood watched as the man she'd been tailing stopped outside La Fleur de Paris, an exclusive French restaurant just off the high street in the centre of Exeter. He looked around, then opened the restaurant door and disappeared inside. Charlotte had been standing in the doorway of an empty shop opposite, pretending to text someone on her smartphone but covertly looking at him. The man was Felix Lyons, husband to Charlotte's friend Tina. She hadn't planned on spending Valentine's evening following Felix, but earlier that day she'd met Tina for coffee and she had spilled her heart out. "I booked a table at the Peregrine 3 months ago. They fill up early for any special occasion because they are uber posh," Tina had said, pouting, "and I put it into his online calendar straight away. Then yesterday he said he couldn't make it because he had an important strategic meeting with a politician that couldn't be cancelled or changed." Tina poured herself more tea. "You don't believe him?" Charlotte looked at Tina over her cup and assessed whether she was overreacting. She'd known Tina for a few years now, having met her when she first moved to the area and wanted to make some local friends. Tina was a similar age, her mid-40s, and they'd got on well, regularly meeting. "Of course I don't believe him, his cancelled Valentine's Day. I've suspected him of having an affair for months, but I've been in denial. I just didn't want to confront it. He's been secretive, and hardly at home." She lowered her voice and leaned forward a little. "We've had intimacy issues for a long time. He's just not interested." "That is suspicious," Charlotte commented. She thought back to a few years ago, when her own marriage had broken up after she'd discovered her husband Idris had been having an affair with her best friend Michelle. It still stung like a knife in the heart, so Charlotte had a lot of sympathy for Tina. No woman should have to put up with her husband cheating on her. "If he's not getting it from you, he'll be getting it from someone else." Charlotte sipped her café latte. "My thoughts exactly. Does he still work at the same place?" Tina nodded. "Still there. Giraffe Renewable Energy. He's one of the senior managers, which means he works long hours sometimes." "What time does he normally leave?" Tina grimaced. "He says he leaves at 7 most nights, but I think he leaves earlier and meets his bit on the side." There was only one way to find out. "I'll follow Felix and see what he's up to. As I've never met him, he won't have a clue." Charlotte put her cup down and took a bite of her scone. Tina sighed. "Oh darling, that would be wonderful. It's so helpful you being a private investigator now. And exciting. How long has it been?" Charlotte couldn't help smiling. 6 months already. It was an unusual change of career for a cybersecurity expert. Being a private investigator meant she could use her knowledge of technology in almost any situation. She'd sort of fallen into it, although she suspected her brother had planned it to give her something positive to focus on after the divorce. She was a self-made multiple millionaire, but having money wasn't all it was cracked up to be, especially when your husband ran off with your best friend. "Leave it to me." "Thank you, darling. I can't bear the thought of Felix seeing another woman. I adore him. But I can't go on not knowing." So here she was, a few hours later, following Felix. On Valentine's night. He'd left work at 6:36 p.m. and gone into a card shop, purchased a Valentine's Day card, then gone to a jeweler's and, after browsing for a few minutes, purchased some earrings. Then he'd gone straight to La Fleur de Paris. Charlotte looked down at her clothes. She'd dressed for following someone, not going to a posh restaurant. Dark jeans, a light blue top and a navy pea coat were not suitable, but she had no choice. She crossed the road and peered inside. The restaurant was like a TARDIS, small on the outside but big when you got inside. She couldn't see Felix though, so before she could talk herself out of it, she went in. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust to the ambient light inside. They had decorated the restaurant with red tablecloths, a small posy of red flowers on each table, and many tea lights, making it look charming. If only she had a boyfriend to bring here. A moment later, a waiter dressed in smart black trousers, crisp white shirt and bow tie came over and looked her up and down. The look of disdain on his face made her skin prickle. Avez-vous one reservation, madame? He asked, in a thick French accent. Charlotte hardly knew any French, but from the 3 years she had endured at school 30 years ago, she knew what he was asking. No, she replied, looking around. Half the restaurant was empty. Do you have a table free? The waiter shook his head. Pardon, madam, we are fully booked tonight. It is Valentine's Day and we have nothing for a single diner. Charlotte pursed her lips. He was insinuating that she shouldn't be out alone on the most romantic night of the year. So what if she was single? She'd had her fair share of romantic meals with ex-boyfriends and her ex-husband Idris. She took her purse out of the small bag slung across her shoulder, counted out 5 20-pound notes, folded them and held them up. Are you sure you don't have a table available? I'd be most grateful. And if you look after me, there'll be the same amount when I leave. The waiter's eyes lit up, he took the money, and his expression changed from disdain to greed. Of course, madam. He executed a small bow and indicated a table to the left. Would this table suit you? No, that one over there. She pointed at a table which would give her the perfect view of Felix, whom she'd just spotted. She sat down at the table, which was set for 2 and decorated like the others with red flowers and tea lights in heart-shaped holders. Felix was looking at his smartphone, oblivious to his surroundings. What would madam like to drink? The waiter asked, shaking out the red napkin and placing it on her lap. Charlotte thought a bit of Dutch courage would help, but she'd stopped drinking months ago and she didn't want to break the streak. I would love a sparkling water, please. Would madam care to see the wine list? No, I'm teetotal. Please don't offer me alcohol. She gave him a stern look. The sort that said, you won't get your tip if you do that again. He nodded and disappeared. Charlotte took out her phone. It was strange being on her own in a posh French restaurant on Valentine's night. She needed a man, and there was only one man that would do, her fellow private investigator, Exe Darrow. They'd been working together 6 months now. It was strictly a professional relationship, though she'd change that in a flash if she could. She sent him a text. SOS. I need you ASAP. Fleur de Paris. I'm inside. CX. She added dress smart, but Angus always dressed smartly so she deleted it. She smiled, he was a stickler for always looking neat and tidy. With some men it would be annoying, but with him it was endearing. She estimated it would take him at least 20 minutes to get to her. He texted back almost straight away. What now? I'll explain when you get here, she replied. On way. Angus was so dependable, and such good boyfriend material. It was unfortunate that he seemed to have no interest in her. Charlotte's stomach rumbled, and she browsed the menu. It was in French with an English explanation underneath: soups et salads, entrees, plats principaux. There was a special Valentine's menu, too. Following Felix earlier, she'd passed a McDonald's and got a whiff. She could murder a Big Mac and fries. Or a stuffed crust pizza with barbecue sauce instead of the usual tomato sauce on the base, topped with tuna, black olives, jalapenos, and extra cheese. Even a cheeky Nando's would have been welcome. She might be a multimillionaire, but she would always be the girl from Hemel Hempstead made good. The special Valentine's menu had asparagus, figs dipped in chocolate, oysters with spicy chili peppers, strawberries and watermelon. Charlotte mused that if a couple needed that much aphrodisiac, maybe they needed a bit more help than a French restaurant on Valentine's Day. As she perused the menu, she kept a careful eye on Felix. He was still looking at his phone. She took out her own phone and ran a few searching programs on the restaurant's WFI to see if he was using it. 5 minutes later, the restaurant door opened and Angus came in, wearing a long, smart black overcoat. A little past 50, his carefully styled, hardly grey hair meant he looked much younger. He glanced around, spotted her, and walked over. Charlotte smiled up at him. That was quick. I was on my way to see a film down the road. You caught me just before I went in. Perfect timing, as ever. He pushed his glasses up his nose. On your own? On Valentine's night? Yep. They're showing Jaws tonight only and I wanted to see it again. How romantic. She indicated the seat opposite. I'm sorry I dragged you away, but I need your help, and you know I hate eating alone. He took off his coat to reveal jeans and a dark navy shirt. No tie, for a change. What's this about, then? He asked, pulling his chair in. It's not just about eating alone, is it? Charlotte leaned forward and lowered her voice. See that man on the table by the yucca plant? Angus turned to look. Don't make it obvious. Charlotte said through her teeth. Were you actually in the police for 25 years? He turned back and gave her a withering look. I've been following him, she whispered. Angus frowned. Why? He's my friend Tina's husband. She thinks he's having an affair. Angus picked up the menu and scanned it. What makes her think that? He's a man, for a start. Angus rubbed his forehead and sighed. Charlotte, Charlotte, Charlotte. Just because your ex-husband had an affair doesn't mean every man does. She sat back, pouting. Lots do, though. So do plenty of women. Anyway, I've been following him and he came in here, a French restaurant on Valentine's night, and I know he isn't meeting Tina. You've got to admit that is deeply suspicious. Angus turned his head slightly and shifted his gaze to the man, this time without it being obvious. All right, he said. His date's not here yet? Charlotte shook her head. A moment later, the waiter appeared. What would monsieur like to drink? Je voudrais un jus d'orange. Tuist ceq vous conseillers au menu? The waiter looked mildly impressed at Angus's French. La salade de chèvre chaude le poulet au citron sont excellents. Avec quoi est servi le poulet? Angus asked. Des pommes frites. Excellent, merci. Ducks d'entrejus, est le nouveau plat. C'est out. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Charlotte stared at Angus, her mouth open, before recovering. Ooh la la, you speak French. That is so sexy. A corner of Angus's mouth turned up into a smile. Do you sprechen Deutsch, too? No, I don't speak German, Angus replied. I ordered for you too, by the way. That's my way of paying you back for dragging me away from the cinema. You have to eat what I ordered. Goat's cheese salad, then chicken with lemon. Charlotte shrugged. Sounds delicious. I've never been able to learn more than a few words of any language. Barely passed my French exam at school. How did you learn? Mum and Dad took us camping in Normandy every summer. That, and school lessons. I also spent a summer working in Le Havre when I was 18, nothing fancy, just maintenance and cleaning at a campsite. That helped. You are full of surprises, Angus Darrow. The waiter returned with their drinks. Angus thanked him and took a sip. So, have you tried scanning the public Wi-Fi to see what he's been doing on his smartphone? Charlotte raised her eyebrows. What makes you think I would do such a thing? Because you do it all the time. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a smile played on his lips. I tried, and he's not using the restaurant Wi-Fi. Angus gave a small chuckle. We'll have to rely on the old-fashioned way of observing and listening, then. The restaurant door opened and a woman came in. Angus's back was to the door, but Charlotte could see her, and her eyes widened in horror. Angus saw her reaction. Is it someone you know? Charlotte nodded, not taking her eyes off the woman. Rona, she muttered. What? Angus turned his head. It was Rona. His ex-wife. She'd brought a gust of cold air in with her. When Felix saw her, he stood up and they kissed each other on the cheek before both sitting down. Angus and Charlotte looked at each other. "What do we do now?" Charlotte murmured. Rona glanced around the restaurant and her gaze fell on their table. She did a double take when she clocked Angus, who gave her a small smile. "Angus." Rona sat back in her chair, momentarily stunned. "Hello, Rona. What are you doing here?" Her gaze shifted to Charlotte. "Silly question, it's Valentine's night." "Here with your blonde bit, I see." "And you're here on Valentine's night with a man who isn't Brian," Angus said in a cool tone. "It's Malcolm, as you well know." "Malcolm is away." She smoothed down her skirt. "He's on a diversity training course in Doncaster and he knows I'm meeting Felix. Not that it's any of your business." Charlotte had met Rona a few times over the last 6 months. She hadn't liked her from the get-go, and the feeling was clearly mutual. "We're not staying long, we have a room booked at the Royal Cavendish." "I just love it when Angus speaks French to me, and what better place than a French restaurant?" Charlotte put a dreamy look on her face, fluttered her eyelashes, then took Angus's hand. It was an outright lie. They weren't dating, they were just working together. But Rona shouldn't have called her a blonde bit. Angus looked confused for a moment, then swallowed nervously. Felix said nothing, watching them and listening to the conversation. "Well, I have an important political meeting. Have a good evening." Rona turned back to Felix and began speaking to him in a low tone. From his reaction, she was telling him who they were. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "How did you ever fall in love with that horrible woman, Angus?" "She's got to be the rudest, nastiest woman I've ever met. She's all right with everyone else. So it's just me she doesn't like?" Angus shrugged. "Well, she doesn't know me at all, so I can only assume she's jealous because she thinks we're seeing each other." Angus sipped his drink. "Charlotte, you can let go of my hand now." "Sorry." She pulled her hand away. "I've had friends like her. They don't want a man, but they don't want any other woman to have him, either. She's a classic control freak. Thinks every man should fawn over her and hates it when he looks at another woman." "Has she always been like this? Have you finished ranting about my ex-wife?" Angus adjusted the fork on the table. "Yes." Charlotte sat back. They were interrupted by the waiter who arrived with their starter. "Duck salads de chèvre," he announced. 2 plates of goat's cheese salad. He made a show of putting the plates down and making sure everything was perfect. "Haven't you been involved with anyone since you divorced?" "You know, romantically," Charlotte said, once the waiter had gone. "What is this, the Spanish Inquisition?" Angus cut into his goat's cheese, speared a piece, and popped it into his mouth. Deflection. "Well, have you?" "Only very briefly. I went on a date or two about a year ago, but it fizzled out." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "And how did Rona behave to whoever she was?" "She didn't meet her. I never mentioned it." "Huh?" "Basically, so she's seeing you with someone for the first time since the divorce and she doesn't like it." Angus pushed his glasses up his nose again. "Thank you for your analysis, but you're reading far too much into it. Rona either likes or dislikes people, she's very binary. She just doesn't like you. Because she thinks we're seeing each other. Is Rona the sort of woman to have an affair? I don't believe she's meeting Felix for business. It's Valentine's Day, for goodness sake. Did she cheat on you when you were married?" Angus gave Charlotte a long stare. "No. Not that she didn't believe him, but Angus wouldn't be the first man to have his wife cheat on him and not know." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," he said flatly, not looking up from his plate. "So if she's not cheating on her boyfriend, even though he's conveniently away, why is she meeting Felix?" She said it was a political meeting. She's a county councillor. Politicians meet with lots of people. They've been talking almost non-stop. It doesn't look like a romantic conversation. Your friend Tina has nothing to worry about. Not with Rona, anyway. If he is having an affair, he'd meet whoever it was tonight, of all nights. Maybe she's married and she's out with her husband. Angus sighed. I'm going to follow him a bit more later, just in case, said Charlotte. You're wasting your time. She gave a tight smile. We'll see. Later on, the waiter brought their main course. The chicken with lemon was cooked to perfection. Charlotte was so impressed, the thought of burgers and pizza dissipated. They finished their meal and skipped dessert, then lingered over coffee. Rona and Felix paid their bill and stood up, and Angus went over to speak to Rona. While he was gone, Charlotte paid the bill and slipped the promised tip to the waiter. Sometimes she wondered how she had managed before she could bribe people. They stepped out into the fresh, bitterly cold air and she turned to Angus. Thanks for coming to my rescue. He gave a shrug. It was a pleasant way to spend an evening. Is Grigor picking you up, or did you drive yourself? Grigor was her chauffeur, come handyman, come brawn. I told you, I'm not going home. I'm going to carry on following Felix. She looked at her watch. It's only 9 o'clock. Plenty of time for him to meet someone else. Angus put his hands in his coat pockets. He isn't having an affair. Not with your ex-wife, but I don't trust him. From what Tina said, he's always late home and generally being very suspicious. You know, Charlotte, you need to work on your trust issues. It's affecting your ability to be a normal human being. That's not very nice. Good night, Charlotte, and thank you for the meal. Angus turned to go, but the door of the restaurant opened and Rona and Felix walked out. They acknowledged him as they passed, then said their goodbyes and parted. Felix walked away from the city centre towards the river Exe, while Rona headed towards the high street. You're still going to follow him, aren't you? Angus said to Charlotte when he was out of earshot. Yep. I bet he's going home. Or not. Charlotte was already walking away. It took a few meters before she realized Angus was walking by her side, and she smiled at him. They followed Felix at a discreet distance for half a mile, until he crossed the road that took him to the quayside. They almost lost him there, but trailed him to an industrial building. He stopped, took out a key, opened the door and went in. Well, that's not at all suspicious. Charlotte said, deadpan. Maybe this is one of his company's buildings. Who does he work for? Giraffe Renewable Energy, and I don't think this is one of theirs. I'll text Tina. Charlotte took out her phone and typed rapidly. About a minute later, a reply arrived. Tina says he's never mentioned it, but she can't be sure. Angus walked towards the building, assessing it, then disappeared around the corner. Charlotte followed. There was one small blacked-out window on the side of the building. Then they reached the back, with an emergency exit and a metal fence. What next? She whispered. We watch, and wait for him to leave. Do we try to get in? Not today. Angus gave her a sidelong glance. We'll wait here and see if anyone else goes in. They stood at the side of the building, close enough to hear the door open but out of sight. How long do you think we should wait? Charlotte whispered, after a minute. I don't know. What else have you got planned for tonight? Charlotte frowned. I need to pee. Angus sighed. Why didn't you go at the restaurant? I didn't need to go then. Charlotte took out her phone to take her mind off it. I'll see if they have an internet connection. She tapped the screen a few times and ran her program to detect and locate Wi-Fi's. The screen flashed. What is it? Angus peered over the phone. There's a Wi-Fi. I'll try and connect to it. She tapped the screen and some text appeared. Then shortly after, I'm in. Angus looked around. It was still deathly quiet. Okay, I'm going to download some of their data and analyze it. 2 or 3 minutes should do it. although, her brow furrowed. The amount of data passing through that Wi-Fi is astounding. That's unusual because whatever they're doing involves heavy and constant use of an internet connection. Angus watched as Charlotte set to work analyzing the data. He had no idea what she was doing, but the occasional hum and what told him that she wasn't far from finding the solution. "Wait, what?" she said, after a few minutes. "That's not what I was expecting." She held the screen up, but all he could see was text that looked like computer code. "You'll need to explain to me what you've found." "Technophobe, remember? It looks like they're mining for cryptocurrency." "Mining? You mean like digging a hole in the ground?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh Angus, you are funny." "No, I mean they're involved in cryptocurrency. You know, finding the next block in the blockchain." Angus stared at her. "I know what cryptocurrency is, Bitcoin. There are others too, aren't there? But why do they have to find blocks?" "It's part of how it works. Cryptocurrencies are just a ledger of transactions that are tied together. The money only exists on the computer. Or rather, lots of computers who agree to add a transaction each time. That's a block. Each block is a unique code generated from a complex hashing algorithm, and that takes time and electricity." "Whoa, stop!" Angus stepped back. "The moment you mention hashing algorithms is when I switch off." Charlotte blinked. "There's more to it, though. I can explain." Angus frowned. "I'm happy to remain ignorant." "Is this illegal?" "No, it isn't. But it takes vast amounts of electricity because you need loads of computers to get the next hash." She paused. "As time goes on, mining cryptocurrencies gets harder and takes longer. Lots of environmentalists are against it because of the amount of energy involved." Angus stared up at the building. "How many computers do you think they have in there?" "I can't tell without more analysis, but if they're doing this seriously, then at least 50. Maybe 100, if not more. And that's even more suspicious, because Felix works for an electricity company." Angus shook his head. I don't like the sound of that. Not even the most dedicated employee checks a facility this late at night on Valentine's Day." "You reckon the company doesn't know?" "It's possible." A moment later, they heard the door open and instinctively backed against the wall. "Oi, come back. You can't just leave," said Felix's voice. "Try and stop me," said another male voice. "I will," Felix shouted. They heard a scuffle, and the door slammed. Angus tentatively peered around the corner. "They're inside." There was a bang on the door, then another, then nothing. Angus moved around the corner to see if they could hear anything. "Shall I call the police?" Charlotte whispered. Angus nodded. Before she could dial 999, the door opened again and a man hurried out, limping as he ran. He was about 30, dressed in jeans and a black jacket. Felix appeared at the door a moment later and ran after him, not even seeing Angus and Charlotte. "I'm going after them," said Angus. "You call the police." He ran after the pair. "Shit." Charlotte watched Angus disappear. He was a regular runner, so he'd have no trouble catching them up. A wave of fear for his safety went through her. Then she felt the phone in her hand and dialed. She was halfway through explaining what had happened to the police operator when she walked into the building. Inside was a corridor with one door at the end, slightly open. "Someone will be there soon," the operator said. Charlotte ended the call and walked through the door. The heat in the room hit her first. It was stifling, and there was a low hum of background noise. Her mouth dropped open as she took in what was in front of her. "Oh my God. If there is a heaven, this is what it looks like," she murmured. The room was no larger than a squash court, but the back wall was filled floor to ceiling with metal boxes, each about the size of a showbox. Each one a small computer. Electrical wires snaked out of them and joined together, running down the middle. Charlotte saw a small desk with a laptop and router. She sat down and pressed the spacebar to bring the screen to life. It lit up, and the screen displayed an array of stats. Footsteps in the corridor startled her, and she backed into the corner behind the door. The figure appeared. It was Angus, panting from running. Charlotte let out a sigh of relief at the sight of him. What happened to Felix and the man? You're a fast runner. I lost them. Turned a corner, and took the wrong alleyway. Did you call the police? Yeah. Angus pointed to the boxes. What are these? Computers. Charlotte said in an awestruck tone. There must be at least 200 of them. I know. Charlotte grinned. Then he pointed to the bottom of the rack and shook his head. All those wires. That's got to be a fire risk, especially in this heat. Charlotte sat back down and studied the laptop screen. From the look of it, they've been successfully mining several cryptocurrencies. Angus walked over to her. We'll find out if this is legal soon enough. I'm going to wait outside for the police and see if Felix comes back. A few minutes later, a car pulled up outside and Angus's former colleague DCI Lockwood got out. Woody Lockwood, Charlotte's older brother. All right, mate, nice to see you again. He smiled at Angus. I got a call saying that my little sister was up to mischief. Woody was over 6 feet tall and an imposing figure. Mostly bald, he shaved the rest of his hair. As a detective, he wore plain clothes, dark trousers, and a dark coat. You're supposed to be keeping her out of trouble, Angus. Angus shrugged. You know Charlotte, she does what she likes. He indicated the building, and they went inside. Mark, what are you doing here? Charlotte hugged her older brother when he entered. Shouldn't you be out with Fiona? He kissed her on the cheek. I had to work, I'll make it up to her tomorrow. I heard the call on the police radio and as I was in the area I offered to respond. What's going on? Angus explained briefly and Woody walked towards the rows of computers. If they are stealing electricity, it'll be up to the electricity company to prosecute. We've discovered a few places like this over the last few months. Really? Charlotte asked. Yep, mostly because an infrared camera has picked up excessive heat from a building and we thought it was a cannabis-growing plant. But it looks like mining cryptocurrency is more profitable these days. Only if they steal the electricity, though, said Angus. Yep. Leave it to me. I'll put a trace on Felix and get some uniforms to watch this building in case he comes back tonight. The place is unlocked, so he'll probably try to return. Woody strode outside and was straight on the phone, giving instructions. Charlotte and Angus followed and sat on a wall outside, listening to Woody. Not long after, Charlotte saw Felix in the distance, approaching the building. She nudged Angus, who gave her a quizzical stare until he also noticed Felix. She went over to Woody and whispered in his ear. Felix walked towards them, frowning. What are you doing? This is private property. Then his frown deepened. You're that couple from the restaurant. Woody reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out his warrant card, displaying the badge. Felix's gaze darted between the three of them, then he made a run for it. Angus pelted after him. Within seconds, he'd caught Felix by his jacket collar and overpowered him. Get off me! Felix shouted, writhing. Woody caught up with them, took out some handcuffs and handed them to Angus. Do the honors, would you, mate? He grinned. Just like old times. Angus cuffed Felix and Woody arrested him, then led him to his car and put him inside. You two okay to stay until the uniforms arrive? They won't be long, he asked. Better get this one to the station before he runs for it again. Once they're here, can you come down to the station and make a statement? Sure, leave it to us, Charlotte said. Cheers, Angus. See you later, Charlie. He winked at her and her eyes narrowed. She hated being called Charlie and he knew it. The uniforms arrived about 10 minutes later, so Angus and Charlotte headed for the police station. After they had given their statements to a constable, Woody came in, dismissed the PC and sat down at the table. He's blabbed like a baby, didn't even wait for a brief. I didn't have to pressure him to talk at all. It was all rather pathetic, to be honest. Nice change though. He's admitted that he set the place up and stealing electricity from his own company. He's given us the address of 3 other places in the city too. His employer will have to decide whether they are going to prosecute. Mind you, it should be a crime to call a company Giraffe Renewable Energy. He laughed. Tina is going to be so angry when she finds out. Why was he meeting Rona? Asked Charlotte. She glanced at Angus and saw him frown. Woody sat back in the chair. Felix is an active campaigner for your ex-Mrs. Angus. It was a planning meeting for the upcoming May election, nothing more. She's confirmed it. So she wasn't involved with this scam. That's a shame. Charlotte felt herself blush. Oops, I'd not meant say that last bit out loud. Angus stared at her for a moment, then decided to ignore the comment. Knowing Rona, she'll be furious at Felix. She's principled, and she won't be happy to be associated with someone who's involved in any criminal activity. Especially when the press hear about it. Charlotte sat quiet for a moment, pondering that it was just like Angus to see the best in Rona even though they divorced. She was jealous as hell. She turned to Angus, seeing as I stopped you seeing Jaws at the cinema, I'll book out a cinema screen for you. It's the least I can do. Thank you, that's very generous. Why don't you come, too? Woody laughed. Last time Charlie saw Jaws, she hid behind the sofa. Mind you, she was 8 at the rhyme. Charlotte felt herself blush deep crimson again. I was upset the dog got eaten. But thanks for bringing that up, Mark. Unfortunately, I have an appointment with my therapist, so I'll have to pass. You haven't booked the screen yet, said Angus, and Woody sniggered. Come on, Charlotte, it's one of the best films ever made. If you get scared again, Charlie, Angus will hold your hand, Woody said, chuckling. Charlotte glared at him, then relented. All right, but no popcorn. It's really annoying. Angus nodded, absolutely. I can't hold your hand if I'm holding popcorn. The end. Find out how Angus and Charlotte met and why they started working together in the first book in the Lockwood and Darrow Mysteries. Exe marks the spot, available now. This audiobook has been created using an AI voice.